ado, I will hand you over to Vicky, who has come to speak to us today about the National Benevolent Charity. Right, yes, isn't it? Yeah. Different. Yeah, it can be called different things, can't it, if you're not careful. So yeah, so I'll hand over to Vicky, and then yes, we'll do questions at the end. So Vicky.
Brilliant. Yes, thanks for the introduction, Karen. Hi everyone, I am Vicky from the National Benevolent Charity. I'm the organisation grants manager there. Just bear with me a second, I'm just going to try sharing my screen. Can everyone see that? Yep. Real. Just check that it works. Yes, amazing. But yeah, before we start, just say thank you so much for taking the time to come and learn about National Benevolent Charity today and our Improving Lives Fund. Before this role, I was a fundraiser for 20 or so years in the VCSE sector, so I know just how stretched and busy you can all be, so thanks so much for taking the time. Some of you might have noticed on the title slide that we have been around since 1812, so a really long time, kind of over 200 years, but not many people have heard of us, so I just thought it probably makes sense to start by giving a really quick overview of who we are. So we're a grant-making charity. We were established in 1812 by the late Peter Hervey, and our mission is to provide financial support to people experiencing poverty at a time of crisis. So historically, we've done this by providing grants to individuals. So we have a really long history of that, but only very recently, in the last kind of 2-3 years or so, we've started providing grants to organisations. So that's kind of a new area of our work. So currently we have 2 funding programmes. So we have our welfare fund, which is the fund that where we provide grants to individuals, and it's to help them buy essential items that will make a positive contribution to their well-being. So things like support with utility bills, food, clothing, white goods, and that fund is national, hence the name, National Benevolent Charity. So individuals can apply from across the UK. So I don't know all your individual organisations, but if anyone is in a position to signpost funding to individuals and is interested in finding more about that fund, because that's not the fund we're talking about today, but then please just either check out our website or feel free to contact me afterwards. And then we have our Improving Lives Fund, which is our grants to organisations programme. So with that, we have one programme with 3 geographical areas of interest. So Bristol, Gloucestershire, Wiltshire and Swindon. Obviously it's this fund that we are going to talk about in more detail today, and obviously the kind of Wiltshire and Swindon area. But before I go into more detail in that, I just thought it might be worth sharing our values as an organisation, as these are reflected through our grant making process. So these are our 3 values: open, compassionate, collaborative. So being open, we try to respond to individual needs and circumstances. Being compassionate, we never forget that people are at the heart of what we do. And being collaborative, so we know we can make a greater difference by working with others. So our Improving Lives Fund for Wiltshire and Swindon, we formally launched this last year. I think it was the 19th of July, so almost a year we've been running the programme. So yeah, as I said, a very new area for us. So in terms of our kind of funding aim, I mean, this relates directly back to our mission. So the aim of our Improving Lives Fund is to make grants to organisations, well, a wide range of organisations kind of across our geographical areas of interest, which can demonstrate that their beneficiaries are experiencing poverty or financial hardship, and that their project, programme or organisation aims to alleviate that poverty. And as it says in the title of the fund, we aim for our funding to improve lives. So yeah, poverty. So how do we define poverty? So we refer to the Joseph Rowntree Foundation definition of poverty, and they've got quite a kind of comprehensive model and recommendations for solving poverty. They're large, well, social change organisation working to solve UK poverty. So they've done lots of kind of research around the area with kind of annual reports on the kind of nature and scale of poverty in the UK. So we use their research as a kind of basis to inform our grant making. So they define poverty as poverty means not being able to heat your home, pay your rent, or buy the essentials for your children. It means waking up every day facing insecurity, uncertainty, and impossible decisions about money. It means facing marginalisation and even discrimination because of your financial circumstances. And so talk about kind of poverty and the kind of constant stress it causes, and kind of leading to problems that deprive people from kind of being able to contribute fully, to play a full part in society. So kind of when we're talking about poverty, we mean that kind of financial poverty, and it's about struggling to pay for essentials and about being able to participate in society. And when your resources are kind of below minimum needs, so they have this house model you can see here, which kind of talks about, they define kind of 3 levels of poverty. So they talk about minimum income standard, which is it's about how much money people need, so so they can buy kind of things that members of the public think that everyone in the UK should be able to afford. So when they talk about income being below the minimum income standard, so that's people who kind of get by day to day, but are under pressure and find it difficult to manage kind of unexpected costs. And then they have the next level, which is not enough income, and they talk about a level where people are kind of falling substantially short of a decent standard of living and a high chance of their needs not being met. And then they have that kind of bottom level, which is kind of destitution, where you can't afford basics such as shelter, food, heating and clothing. So we kind of use this as our kind of basis definition of poverty. And in terms of then how we tackle it, so I'd say typically the work we fund falls into the following areas. So firstly, kind of helping people out of that destitution in that kind of real time of crisis. So we typically fund kind of homelessness work, food insecurity and fuel poverty. And then we look at other routes to kind of lifting people out of poverty. So education, employment and training. Obviously kind of that's thought as one of kind of the best routes to lift you out of poverty. And then we look at strengthening families and or communities and access to benefits and reducing costs. So yeah, so our funding principles. So I know lots has been, I think the pandemic was a real opportunity for people to talk about kind of grant making processes and principles, and lots of kind of UK trusts and foundations kind of responded by being more accessible, more flexible, offering more core funding, kind of simplifying application processes and making kind of quicker decisions. You know, I think we're all aware of what a challenging time it was for the VCSE sector, who kind of showed huge resilience and ability to adapt, you know, lots having to kind of change business models and losing funding sources. And obviously we were developing our grant making programme as well in response to the pandemic, really. So we kind of all of this, these kind of things we were thinking about as we were developing it. And obviously now, as we're going into the cost of living crisis, there's kind of even more pressure. So we try to kind of, these principles have been kind of at the forefront of how we have developed the programme. So being transparent, open and trusting, and unrestricted funding. So I think when we started, we talked about providing kind of core or flexible funding, and I think now feeling there's a move to kind of taking that a bit further and being happy to provide unrestricted funding. Ease of application process. So we hope applicants find our process easy. We're just having kind of formally launched a year ago, we're just starting to kind of embark on a review of the programme, and we'll use kind of any feedback collected to kind of inform that programme going forwards. But we hope it's relatively simple and that we maintain, well, yeah, a relatively quick decision-making process. We're a really small team and kind of work at pace. I mean, I'd love to be able to reduce the amount of time we take to reach an outcome, which we say is normally up to kind of maximum of 3 months for our larger grants, but just with our current resource, we're not able to kind of reduce it anymore. But, and then proportionate reporting, we have fairly relaxed reporting requirements. I think as much as possible, we try to have these being led by our grantee partners. And then engagement and collaboration. Where possible, we like to invest in our grantee relationships. Again, as I said, we are a really small team with limited resource. So the flip side of that, I suppose, is building relationships where we can, but also trusting and listening to our grantee partners, so we know that they're the experts on the ground, and so kind of trusting them to go ahead and do the work that they set out to achieve, but being kind of responsive to their needs. So they are our kind of funding principles. And then if we look at who can apply, we particularly look to fund infrastructure and frontline organisations working with marginalised people. So we would consider applications from national organisations for specific work or projects taking part in one of our geographical areas of interest. But I think for us, there has to be kind of strong local partnerships and where kind of outcomes would have a substantial impact on the local community. I think given the scope of our funding, you know, we don't have huge pockets, and so for us, I'd say we're more impactful, I suppose, in funding kind of small grassroots community groups or kind of small to medium-sized charities. It doesn't mean that those bigger organisations can't apply. And then we are happy to support organisations which are well, you don't have to be a registered charity to apply, you just have to be a not-for-profit and have an agreed constitution. So we would consider funding social enterprises, but probably more around things like kind of startup or kind of expansion costs, rather than kind of their ongoing costs. But I would just always say, if you're kind of uncertain on the organisation, then contact me and we can have a chat about it. So what can you apply for and how much? So we provide unrestricted funding. As I said, you know, we believe our kind of grantee partners are the experts on the ground, and we trust that they will utilise the funding in its most valuable way for their kind of beneficiaries. And I think by talking about now, by providing kind of unrestricted funding, it just feels that it's a bit more flexible, so it can respond to kind of changing needs, and the needs can be defined and shaped by the grantee partners. So we are happy to fund kind of core costs such as salaries and general running costs, but also project or capital costs too. We want organisations to apply for what they most need. Some people seem to prefer to apply for projects, so I suppose we just say unrestricted, because you can either just apply for unrestricted or you can apply for whatever you wish, whatever you most need. And then we remain open to single or multi-year funding, and in exceptional circumstances interim funding. And the maximum award per organisation is £10,000 per year. So how do you apply? So our application process. So applications are submitted directly online through our website. The presentation is going to be shared, isn't it, Karen? So people will have, the website details there. Great. It's an open rolling programme, so there's no deadlines, so applications can be submitted at any time and are reviewed regularly. We are trying to kind of keep the administrative burden as low as possible for applicants and grantees, so we're trying to keep the process kind of simple and streamlined, so it's kind of one short form for all applicants to ensure fairness, which is a few kind of simple questions just to capture contact information and some kind of basic information to give us an overview of the organisation, and then that's submitted alongside supporting information which has no set format, so it's an opportunity for applicants to share their story and needs, and I think the hope is that approach will, as much as possible, kind of prevent any barriers to application, particularly for smaller organisations who may not employ professional fundraisers, sorry. And so we have set out some guidelines that might help you on what you might want to include in your supporting document. We are also happy to accept kind of video or audio or PowerPoint presentations, as long as it's something which kind of shows your organisation and beneficiary needs clearly. So the reason for doing that, I suppose, we're happy to accept things that you might have already pulled together or used for another funding application, basically just to try and reduce time spent on applications. And then, I'm available to be contacted throughout the process. It's my email there, but it'll be shared at the end. So the guidelines, so these are all on our website, the guidelines for supporting information. We do say just to try and limit words if possible to 1,500 words, or video or audio to 5 minutes. There's no set forms, you don't have kind of specific word content within for specific questions, but we just ask for not pages and pages of application. And no format, so it's an opportunity for you to share your story. And these are just some ideas or suggestions of what you may want to include. Obviously, not all of them might not be relevant to your organisation or your application, but it's just to give some guidelines to support applicants. So a brief description of your organisation. So maybe your kind of aims, achievements, developments, the need. So what's the vital need, or what issues are you addressing? How will you or do you do that effectively? What difference does your organisation make? Summary of funding requests, so just how much funding is requested, what will it be used for, what is the period of the funding request, impact or outcomes. So you might wish to highlight a few specific outcomes that you aim to achieve from the funding, or how you might monitor and evaluate them. Or if it's core or unrestricted funding, you may just want to just say how your organisation is best placed to deliver the work, or give some examples of kind of successes or previous experience. Leadership, so we know that inspiring leadership can make all the difference, so you might just wish to share some details of CEO or people who are delivering the work, or board of trustees. Partnerships, we know more can be achieved by working with others, so you might wish to share about how you are collaborating with others and who that might be. Financial summary, so you might wish just to include a simple budget for the year. We don't ask for you don't have to submit this, and we don't have kind of set formats of budgets that you need to complete, but you might feel it supports your application if you submit a budget for the year, or if you're requesting funding for a project, just a simple project budget or a fundraising plan. And then should you choose to add any case studies, images or testimonials, we know they can kind of help or kind of demonstrate how your work is really compelling. None of this is required, it's just suggestions of what you might like to include. So the decision-making process. So we work at pace and aim to kind of maintain a reasonably quick decision-making process. So obviously we kind of have the initial review of the application, and then once we've undertaken that, those identified as eligible will be taken forwards to the next stage, which is a phone call or Zoom. And we contact applicants to schedule this within a couple of weeks of receiving the application. And the purpose of the meeting, it's obviously to kind of, to ensure we kind of fully understand the applicant organisation, the proposed work, to kind of fill in any missing gaps or answer specific questions. So it's functional, but I think for us as well, we just find there's huge value to a conversation rather than just doing everything over written communication. We find we get a much better feeling for the organisation, and you can start to build a bit of a relationship. So we hope that in the application process, we hope that's seen as a positive step and a great opportunity to share your brilliantness, I suppose, rather than being a daunting stage in the process. So it's really informal, and to give applicants time to prepare, then we email over questions or areas to be discussed beforehand. And then obviously it's also an opportunity for you to ask any more questions about us or about the application process. And then following the meeting, we assess applications against a framework to ensure consistency in the application process, and also to ensure alignment with our charitable objects. Applications aren't assessed on grammar or writing style. And then applications to be considered for funding are then presented at a grants panel meeting. And that's where they'll be discussed and a final outcome will be reached. So then after that, we communicate decisions to applicants, and all unsuccessful ones will receive feedback. So that'll be via email, or if they wish, they can have a phone call as well. And then there's no right of appeal. So in terms of timescales, so we respond to all, aim to respond to all applicants within 2 weeks of receiving an application, just to inform them of the next steps in the process. And then for smaller grants, so up to £2,000, a decision will be made within a month. For larger grants, so up to £10,000, it may take up to 3 months from the point of application to reach a decision. Much of the time we reach a decision quicker than that, but sometimes it does take the full 3 months. And then if you're successful, payments tend to be made pretty quickly after that, just once we've got all the right documentation. And then in terms of grantee reporting, as I said earlier, we kind of value the importance of kind of building effective relationships where we can, just to help us remain a kind of flexible and accessible funder, ultimately to strengthen communities, but also kind of strengthen our knowledge. And so I talked earlier about being a kind of trusting and listening our grantee partners and being responsive to their needs. So we know how busy our grantee partners can be, so we try to ensure that when we are making contact, that there's a reason for it, that it's purposeful and that it's positive. So in terms of reporting, we aim for it to be as light touch as possible. We try to agree these at the outset when communicating them with our grantee partner when we make the award. And we do see the value in conversations and kind of open and honest communication. So where possible, we might do reporting via a phone call or Zoom or a project visit rather than having a more formal report. We would also consider using any existing frameworks that grantee partners have, or any reports they've produced for other funders. Again, just trying to ease that burden. And and where possible letting the grantee partner kind of lead that and elect their own preference for format. And then, yeah, I just thought I'd finish with a few kind of top tips. So always start by reading our guidelines. They're available on our website. There are tabs across the top on about applying to us, and then there's a drop down that's kind of individuals or organisations. And then our key criteria, obviously poverty. So you need to be able to demonstrate that you're working with people who are experiencing poverty or financial hardship. And then place. So obviously you need to be able to demonstrate that your work is taking place in Wiltshire or Swindon. Preferred application is online. Please use simple language, kind of no jargons. People, yeah, so obviously kind of people at the heart of what we do. So just so you can demonstrate how your work is improving lives for individuals and communities. Tell your story and bring it to life. So evidence need and how you're meeting that need, how you're improving lives, how you're tackling poverty and the difference your organisation is making. And yeah, bringing it to life. So if you do have case studies or pictures or any evidence, I think that they can be really powerful, can really help your application. I think particularly with our grants panel, they obviously don't have the contact with the organisations that I have, so I think that kind of evidence can really help bring it all to life. Partnerships and collaborations to show how you're working together to increase impact and strengthen communities. Financial position and the sustainability of the organisation. Yeah, I suppose with that I just want to say, I mean, if you have accounts submitted with the Charity Commission, then we'll do all the kind of background work, and it's just about getting an understanding of your financial position, the stability of the organisation. But I suppose I wanted to say that if there are any anomalies, it's not necessarily an issue. As I said, we're open to conversations, so just be honest and explain why. Having been involved in a startup organisation a number of years back, I know how for the first few years we had very, very strange accounts that went kind of up and down, but quite a large funder kind of trusted us, and I just remember how valuable that was, that I could have a conversation with them and be able to explain why our accounts looked a bit strange. So just to say, yeah, we're open to conversations and not necessarily averse to risk. And yeah, just apply for what you most need. As I said, kind of we know you're the experts on the ground. We're happy to offer unrestricted funding, but if you really want to, you can apply for something more specific. And I think some people worry that if they apply for kind of core or unrestricted rather than a project, that it might be less likely to be successful. But just to say that's not the case at all. No application has more chance of success based on whether it's unrestricted or project or core, whatever. It's more to do with the organisation, the work you're doing, and how that meets our charitable objects. And then, yeah, I just say it can be helpful getting someone else to read through your application. A fresh set of eyes or someone who's kind of less close to it can help. And just to say, yeah, that I am kind of contactable throughout, and my contact will be shared. And yeah, if you're thinking of applying, like, yeah, please just do get in touch. I'm happy to have conversations at any stage of the application process. So yeah, please do, yeah, get in touch and consider applying. Yeah, and then thank you. And yeah, any questions? I don't know if we're taking questions now or later. But also just to say, actually, we are, as I said, we've been running the programme just short of a year next week, and we're about to undertake a review of it. So we're new and we are learning along the way. So if anyone has any comments or feedback or thoughts on how we may be able to kind of better support the sector, then yeah, we're open to it. So yeah, please do get in touch. Okay, thank you. I'll stop sharing. Shall I stop sharing?
Yeah, thanks, Vicky. Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you ever so much for that. That was really good, and some good top tips there as well, which I think would go across all funders. You know, we quite often have those same sort of conversations, so well worth taking note of those. Thanks, Vicky. Yeah, we've got a couple of questions in the chat. So in terms of applying, you know, you've got a good open process. We've got one organisation that is actually in the process of creating a video. So they're just trying to understand what else would be sort of helpful to go along with that. And I think the specific question was around financial details. Yeah, and a budget. So if they're submitting a video that talks about the need and who they're supporting, would evidence of their sort of budget and financial details be helpful too?
Yeah, that would be great, because I suppose if it's a generic video about the organisation or some specific work you're doing, I suppose just a supporting document that would just to show what you are applying for. And yeah, it's up to you if you want to kind of break down a budget or give a overarching, but yeah, I think it's difficult to say without knowing kind of what's included in the video, but I think the application form would all have all the generic kind of not general information to the organisation. So yeah, the financial would probably be all that's needed, or just a summary of what you're applying for. But again, I'm happy to be contacted, or happy to be contacted at any stage, or if they wanted to share the video beforehand, and then I could talk about anything that might be missing. But as I said, the next stage in the process is always a follow-up conversation. So if there's anything that we feel is missing still from that application process, then that can be picked up in the conversation afterwards.
Yeah, brilliant. Does that give you everything you need, Bella, for your question? Yeah, brilliant, lovely, thank you very much. Okay, so we've got a question from Peter. I think that's Harnham Day Centre. So hi, Peter. So you've got members from different backgrounds, and some of whom find it difficult to cover the cost of the day. So you've got a range of sort of need in terms of income by the sounds of things. So would you need to implement some sort of means test, as the question, Peter, wasn't it? How do you prove, I suppose, that you've got...
Could I have a little bit of background? I only started as in this sector in February, March, and by April I was a chair of this organisation, HEY. And I noticed that there are a range of people, and I want the organisation to be inclusive, but it's accidentally exclusive simply because of getting to us. We're talking about doubling the cost of a day with us simply because of transport costs. And one of the things I'd like to implement is an ability to pay for that transport, because I'm sure then that there's a lot more people who will be able to come and see us and enjoy the benefits. We're talking about basically the over 80s who are living alone because of bereavement, etc., or separated from their families by distances, because a lot these days. So to make it inclusive, one of the things I'm looking to do is pay for that transport cost, because then I believe that the actual cost of the day, which is up to £10 at the moment, is achievable by most people. However, I know that putting in a means test may well, again, generate exclusion, because people are proud and don't want that sort of thing to happen. So how do I get around that particular barrier?
Yeah, I don't think we'd need anything like a means test. I don't know if you're able to evidence, I don't know if you collect any, you probably don't collect data, do you, in terms of kind of postcodes or anything of people coming in and using your service? No, I assume.
I don't need to do that, because one of the things I like to do is talk to people.
Yeah.
And so I get a sense of what's going on simply by having a chat to people, finding out where they're at. So I do know of individuals who are having difficulty simply because of having a quiet talk with them.
Yeah, well, I think any of that anecdotal stuff is fine, and that would kind of support the application. I think also if there is, I don't know if there is any data on deprivation local, like of kind of any of the local surrounding areas that might be able to support. Anyway, I don't know where that sits. Sorry, where did you say you're from?
I live in the middle of a council estate in Salisbury.
Salisbury, okay. Okay.
So
It's one of those areas that has real mixed as well, doesn't it?
Well, it's a small city, so you're bound to get people rubbing shoulders, if you like, with each other. It's
one of the things
streets apart from each other.
Yeah, one of the things we have available on our website is a report that brings together all of the data on need in Wiltshire and Swindon, so that would be well worth having a look at and think what the sort of needs in Salisbury are, and then you can sort of look at, maybe get a sense of the number of people that you've got coming to your sector from those areas. But I think we would probably say something very similar, you know, that all that anecdotal evidence, if you could say from your knowledge of people, this number of people fall within that sort of category, and these are the number of places we would like to subsidise for the transport costs, for example. If you
Thank you, Carol.
sort of way.
Do you have a name for that report, please?
It's just called the needs analysis, I think.
Okay, thank you.
Send a link out, but it's on our website.
Thank you.
And I know sometimes travel's a bit of a tricky one for people to fund, isn't it, as well? So I think from our side, in terms of how that might alleviate poverty, I suppose looking at how what you're offering might strengthen the community or families, or I suppose it's reducing costs.
This isn't families, this is lonely old people, frankly.
So it's well-being, improving well-being and all sorts of things, isn't it? Excellent. Thank you, Peter, for that question. We have got a couple more that have come in since, so let me just make sure I'm going with the first one. Another question is just interested to know how many applications have been received for the Swindon and Wiltshire programme over the last year, and what's the sort of success rate? How many were successful? I
should have looked at my numbers beforehand, because I was thinking total grants kind of across all three regions. So I mean, because I think we started in 2019 where we did 3 grants in Bristol, and then in 2020 we did kind of 18 grants. Majority of them were in Gloucestershire. I think we did 2 foundational ones in Wiltshire and Swindon, and then we formally launched last year in 2021 in Wiltshire, and we had 22 grants across all 3 areas. Just seeing if I can have a quick, I should have looked at how many in Wiltshire. I think the majority were in Wiltshire, but I should have looked at that specifically beforehand. I mean, we're probably looking at about 12, I suppose, but that was for half a year last year. So when we launched, we did 6 over the 6 months of 2021. We launched in July. To date this year, I suppose in the 6 months of this year, we've done 32 grants in total. So we've we've doubled our budget, which is still small compared to a lot of other funders. And I'd say half of them are Wiltshire and Swindon.
Oh, well, thank you. So picking up, and like you say, still learning as you go along, but I think, you know, it's great that you would be taking that feedback as well as you go along, so that's really helpful. Excellent. A clarification question around the levels of poverty on the Joseph Rowntree scale. So do you consider funding organisations helping people in all the levels 1 to 3 of poverty?
Yes.
Brilliant. There's an offer here from Carol Willis from VAS Voluntary Action Swindon, who is had to leave because of internet problems, but she has offered support to anybody based in Swindon who wants any help to read through applications, so that was really helpful of her.
Oh, brilliant.
I think possibly similarly, if you needed any help with fundraising, we also have Wessex Community Action, who would support organisations based in Wiltshire and that would be Anita Hansen is the main contact there. Oh yeah, it's Karen, yeah, from Corsham has said you got the same problem paying for people for sort of going out for the days and outings and things, so transport's an issue for you, Karen, as well.
Oh, yeah.
Accessibility.
Yeah, because obviously we're such a rural group. I like Peter have problems with people that won't come to us because they simply just can't afford the transport to get to us. They could afford the meal when they get there, but it's the transport, you know. In our case it would probably be taxis, because buses in Corsham and the surrounding villages are not an option really. So we would be looking for like a core pot that we can dip into to top up what they can afford, because most of ours could afford half of it but not the whole of it. So we normally pay for the coach and then they pay for their meal. So would you fund a core pot that we could dip into and out of, or is that not, you know, if I asked for £2,000 as a year's travelling expenses, would that be acceptable?
Potentially, yes. We'd need to think about just a bit more about how it's set up and managed. We piloted something kind of similar in Bristol before that hadn't worked so well, but I think it was initially the way it was set up. But I know, for example, we have funded an organisation working with refugees and asylum seekers in Swindon, and some of that funding was for supporting them on the Steps to Work programme, but then we also gave them a discretionary pot that they could then use to support people with, I don't know, to help them get work ready, so with work clothes or courses to support them in applying for a job, or so we've done similar things. So I think we just need to look at how it's set up, I think.
Yeah, because most of our coaches from here, you're looking at £500 easily to get anywhere really that they would want to go a day. So yeah, I mean, both coaches we've done in the past have been close on £500 for the day.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Karen. I'm just aware of the time at the moment, so I'm just sorry. don't want to rush, but Jack from Widows Counselling, you had a question you wanted to.
Yeah. Hi. Can you hear me? Yeah. God, I hate when people say that. I can't believe it. Vicky, I'm from Willows. It's Jack here, and firstly, we got a grant from you last year on the 1st of November. Does that mean I cannot apply again until after the 1st of November this year, or can I put an application in today? Well, you know.
We normally say until the end of the grant period. I can't remember the specific detail. I can remember that there was two kind of different elements to the funding, and I can't remember if there was timeframes around it. We would normally say until the year has passed, but why don't I just think in terms of timescales of our next, we've got a bit of a gap between grants panel meetings anyway, but perhaps should we get in touch separately? And I'll go back and look at and just remind myself of the details of the
funding. That's fine. And also I just want to say that I really liked your presentation, because the way you described the process and how approachable you are has been exactly the experience that we've had at Willows. It's been a real pleasure to be able to approach you and just be not sure about this. And then also, before we got the grant, you came on a Zoom with myself and Tanya, who's the director, and it was a real pleasure to be able to colour in what we did. So just saying to everyone else, it's really quite one of the most pleasurable grant processes I've gone through. So thank you, Vicky, for making it as user-friendly as you possibly can, and thank you for being so friendly as well.
Oh, that's really good to hear. Thank you. That's really kind. Thanks for the feedback.
Oh, that's excellent, brilliant. So I think that's the end of the questions in the chat. I see my colleague Joe, who's also on the call, has popped in the link to the Wiltshire and Swindon, or Swindon and Wiltshire needs analysis, which we talked about, Peter. So if anybody else wants to have a look at that, that is the link, and she'll send it out with the slides as well. So that's really, really handy. Are there any other questions if you just wanted to quickly pop your hand up? No, that's brilliant. Okay, well, so thank you very much to Vicky. We usually take this opportunity to do a quick run through our own grants programme. So although I'm sure most people are quite familiar with them now, it's always handy just to have a quick run through in case you need a refresh. And also, you know, we always mention a couple of other programmes that we have that we run on behalf of other funders as well. I will do a quick run through of this because I realise we only have 10 minutes left of the time that we've allocated. So I shan't bore you with too many of the details, because obviously you can always have a look on our website. Right, let me share my screen quickly. So I won't go through it in as much detail as I would usually do. Yeah, so just to remind everybody, we do grants to groups. That's what we're often known for, but we do have a few grants programmes for individuals, which I'll mention later. That's usually around education for young people and fuel poverty. We do provide a bit of information and advice for groups, but obviously we also signpost to organisations such as Voluntary Action Swindon or Wessex Community Action, who can provide a lot more sort of detailed support for voluntary and community groups. We do a lot of supporting donors to give to their community, because that's where we get all our money from different trusts, you know, companies, individuals, families, all sorts of sources of the funds that we have to award through grants. And then we've already mentioned that we do some exploring of need in our communities as well, and sort of networking and understanding what's going on in the area, so that we can sort of help both inform our grant making, but also provide some support to organisations as well. Our main grant programme is our community grants programme, and that's supporting people and communities, you know, most in need in Wiltshire and Swindon. So in many ways mirroring what Vicky has said about their programme. Yeah, so projects and activities that improve people's lives. We can award grants for up to 3 years, so you can apply for 1, 2 or 3 years. Generally our minimum is about 750 a year, and our maximum is £5,000 a year for up to 3 years. But if you're applying for capital, then that would need to be a one-off up to £5,000 application for 1 year. Again, our priority is also grassroots and small to medium-sized organisations. In terms of people benefiting from our grants, our focus also is on people who are living on low incomes. Our main priorities at the moment are projects and activities that address the impact of the pandemic, that support children and young people, prevent or alleviate poor mental health, tackle poverty and inequality. But of course, we're happy to consider applications that fall outside of these, as long as you've identified a need in your community and you can evidence that in some way. And, you know, we've talked about anecdotal evidence being, you know, as helpful as sort of factual, you know, and, you know, figures and that sort of thing. Again, you know, fairly open, although we don't necessarily talk about unrestricted funding. You can, you know, fund something you're already doing or a new activity or project. We can cover core running costs. We can cover, you know, projects and activities, and I mentioned capital costs with those specific restrictions around the amount that you can apply for. Generally, we would expect you to be able to start spending the grant within 6 months of when it was awarded, so you sort of need to be ready to go, I suppose, is what we're saying. But again, we're very open. Do contact us if you know, hit any problems. We can negotiate that. We can agree extensions if necessary. But, you know, ideally, we're looking for you to be sort of able to ready to go within 6 months. Yeah, again, a fairly wide range of organisations that can apply. You can be a constituted voluntary or community organisation. You don't have to be, you know, big enough to be registered. You can be a larger registered charity. We do cover not-for-profit companies, including community interest companies. You can't hold more than one community grant at a time. So again, similar to the discussion that you just heard there, you know, your timing of applying again to us would need to be sort of coming to the end of any current community grants you have with us. But you can also hold any of the grants that we run on behalf of other people. So, you know, for example, we work with Wessex Water. So if you've got one of their grants, that doesn't exclude you from applying to a community grant through us as well. We do focus on local or regional organisations. If you are a regional organisation, you know, so not based necessarily in Wiltshire or Swindon, if you're based in the southwest, the beneficiaries would need to be living in Wiltshire or Swindon of the grant. You can be a branch of a national organisation, but you would have to have your own local management committee in Wiltshire or Swindon, your own constitution and bank account. And then we are probably a little bit more prescriptive than what Vicky's described in that we do, you know, we want to see that you've got an active voluntary management committee with at least 3 people, and those people can't be related to each other or in a long-term relationship or living at the same address. So at least 3 independent individuals. And there's a list there then of the sort of financial arrangements we would be looking at. So we need to know that you've got at least 2 signatories on your bank account, again, not related to each other. We tend not to fund groups that have more than 12 months running costs in unrestricted reserves. That will be something that we would discuss. Again, we, like Vicky, would usually do a phone call or a video call or even a visit, you know, to chat through the application form. So it really doesn't matter if you haven't got it all sorted on the application form. Do the best you can and we'll unpick anything that we need to know. You know, it's helpful to have a financial plan. Obviously we need a bank statement, because if you get awarded the grant, we need to know where it goes. And we would be looking at your constitution. You know, we do focus on safeguarding and equality policies. Policies are important, but your practice is more important. So we would be looking at what you do in terms of making people safe and making sure that the broadest range of people can come to your activities. If you don't have policies in place, again, that's something that we can discuss with you. And we do have an option for, particularly for very, very small or very new organisations, if you haven't got those things in place, you could partner with another organisation that does have those things in place, and they could manage the grant on your behalf. So that is something that we have in place. Just the list here speaks for itself really in terms of the things that we don't fund. So our money through the community grants can't be then paid out to individuals or families directly. It could cover costs, but we wouldn't be looking for money to actually be given out to individuals or families. Activities which duplicate an existing service. This is quite important. We need to know that you are aware of what else is going on in your area when you apply, and to make sure that you're not actually duplicating something, and if you are duplicating an existing service, that you're clear that that is meeting a need, because the need is huge and there needs to be more than one organisation doing that in your area. So just have a think through, make sure that you're quite well networked with who else is doing things in your area. Yeah, and there's a few other things there. You know, we tend not to fund one-off events, but if it's part of a programme of things, that would be different. Advancement of religion, medical research, animal welfare, all the usual sorts of things. And we don't fund statutory bodies or schools. A few of our programmes do, but that's because they're separate to this programme. Community grants wouldn't cover that. Oh, and then just quickly to just let you know, I mentioned we work with Wessex Water. They have a foundation. They have a community fund with us. Unfortunately, it doesn't cover it doesn't cover Swindon because that's not in their patch, but most of Wiltshire is covered. We're due to open for that around September, I think towards the end of September. that would be grants up to £3,000. I've put in brackets here, that's the details of the 2021 programme, because they do sometimes sort of tweak it each year. But what they did with us last year was, again, programme to improve the lives of people, especially those most in need of support. So very similar to what you've heard from myself and Vicky already. They have a particular focus on supporting people in financial difficulty who are lacking access to services, particularly in terms of areas of multiple deprivation or rural isolation. They're looking at, you know, what builds stronger communities or more resilient communities. Any work that helps people to manage or avoid debt, or educate people around steps to financial, you know, capability, money management, that sort of thing. So they're quite focused on the financial side of things. Very quickly, just in case anybody is interested in any environmental sustainability type projects, just to promote, for Swindon, we have the Science Museum and Rawton, their Solar Park Community Benefit Fund. We have just done a round of that, but please be aware that if you are planning any sort of sustainable or environmentally friendly projects, and you're based in the Swindon area or within 10 kilometres of the Science Museum site, which mostly takes in Swindon, they have large grants up to £20,000, but again, that's quite specific around the environment and sort of science, technology, engineering, that type of thing. But you never know, you might have something on the back burner there. And then Wessex Water also have an environment fund with us. That's a lot smaller, £1,500, but again, any community group that wants to do anything, you want to set up an allotment, you want to build a community orchard, you want to, I don't know, I can't think of any, you want to do a litter picking activity, you want to do recycling, you know, there might be things that for your groups you would want to do that is around environment and sustainability, and that would be something to think of. Again, we've just done a round of that, but that will open again next spring. And then just very quickly, in case you have contact with any young people or young adults, we have our vocational grants, which are open all year, and that's grants up to £1,000 for young people aged 14 to 24 undertaking vocational courses or trainings or apprenticeships. And then a new fund for us is the South West Enterprise Fund. That again is open all year, grants up to £2,000, and that's for young people or young adults 18 to 30 planning to start their own businesses. So again, if that's anything that you could signpost people to, that would be really helpful. And finally, just to remind you, we run a few network meetings. So we run the Swindon Connecting People and Wiltshire Connecting People networks. That's looking at sort of loneliness and connecting people with their communities. We also run a youth network. It's actually a youth work network for youth organisations in Wiltshire and Swindon. And then we also do workshops, which you can have a look at on our website. The ones coming up, which are sort of after the summer break really now. We've got Using Commercial Thinking. So that's one of our community interest company leaders who would kind of talk about using commercial thinking in charities. And then Understanding Need, which is looking at the report that we mentioned, the needs report, so how you can use that with your funding applications. And like I say, we do have a plan to sort of continue the Meet the Funder webinars if you're finding them useful. So again, any feedback on that's quite helpful. Have a look on our website or on our Eventbrite page there, I think. Oh yes, and then that's just a list of other. So we do have a free searchable database on our website, although unfortunately we don't have the resources to keep that up to date. For very small groups, there is something called My Funding Central, which you can access for free if you're very, very small. Wiltshire Together is something that's run through Wessex Community Action, so you can network with each other, and sometimes there'll be funding opportunities and other networking opportunities there. We've mentioned Voluntary Action Swindon and Wessex Community Action, also Community First based in Devizes as well. That can provide support and have some funding available. And yeah, that's sort of other links there that you can have a look at later. All right, so I think that's everything from me. So